What is pragmatism? Pragmatism is a philosophical movement that came out of America in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was started by a logician, a scientist, and philosopher named C.S. Peirce when he had read the Critique of Pure Reason in the original German, but he found that there were some problems with it, such as that despite his best efforts, Immanuel Kant could not really explain beyond faith and belief why his concepts of pure reasoning can be accepted as true. That Immanuel Kant also took for granted the cogito, the I think, and also not only the cogito, but this whole entire idea of sensibility, the sense impressions, how our bodies can see externals. So he would write so much, and as he would be writing, eventually his lectures, his essays would reach a man by the name of William James. Now, William James was a psychologist who was interested in the idea of how our beliefs can impact external reality and so on. He's famous for the will to believe and his own lectures on pragmatism, which I'll take a lot of breaking down in this particular presentation. But until then, let's talk about C.S. Peirce. So, while he was criticizing Immanuel Kant, he gave us three concepts from metaphysics: truth, innateness, externality. Now, truth is divided between verisimilitude, veracity, and verity. Now, verisimilitude is falsehood, basically, because it's a imperfect sign. Veracity is where the sign constantly is supported and by the thing it represents. That there's a lot of unity, continuity. Verity is where it's pretty constant, like to the point where it's perfect. So that's the clearest ideas you have are those which are said to have verity. And the representation itself is called a type. Now, innateness refers to the fact that C.S. Peirce, when he's talking about these things, he's doing it from a concept where he doesn't really believe in intuitions. According to the article by Myers on the externalist epistemology of Peirce, that his rejection of intuitionism is the thing that we have, instead of intuition, an education shaping our innate reasoning skills, that we do not know intuitively that we have intuitions, and that intuitions are considered psychologically, but the cognitions are basically mental presuppositions. Externality. This is explained easily from the same stuff as in my discussion of truth from Peirce, that verisimilitude, falsehood, verity is like the highest degree of truth. You have the fact that the sign must relate to what is being represented, that the represented is not the same as the thing representing. Secondly, that with the rejection of intuition, one could only be guilty of basically begging the question by assuming their intuitions. Though this is clear that he does not take issue with believing, for in the fixation of belief, he promotes belief over doubt. In his treatise on metaphysics, he says to us, where there is faith, properly speaking, there is knowledge. So in another essay, as well as one of his lectures, he gives us 3 more categories. Quality, which is referenced to ground, which ground is the pure abstraction of quality. Relation is reference to correlate, which is to compare and contrast between things correlated. Representation, and its reference to the interpretant, which is the mediating representation. This is also presupposed by him 3 more things. The supposed objects, which are quale, which is reference to ground, the pure abstract of quality. The relate, which refers to the pure abstract of quality, the ground, and the correlate. And the representamen, which is a word referring to the ground, the correlate, and the interpretant. Then there are 3 types of signs. Terms, which determine the ground, the pure abstraction of the quality. Proposition, which determines the objects by terms. Then you have, finally, the arguments, which determines the interpretant, and the premising forth of propositions, which all goes back to the abstract of quality. Of course, next, now that these basics are covered, let's move on to Peirce's associate, William James. Now, I do have a series of quotes I would like to read and comment on. First, in the Pragmatism lectures, he says, no particular results then so far, but only an attitude of orientation is what the pragmatic method means. The attitude of looking away from first things, principles, categories, supposed necessities, and looking towards the last of things, fruits, consequences, and facts. So, immediately, you understand that he's kind of giving a definition that excludes the very founder of pragmatism, C.S. Peirce, who's very much interested in these types of things. But let's continue that William James also was an advocate of instrumentalism. From the same book, he says, if you follow the pragmatic method, you cannot look at any such words as closing your quest. You must bring out of each word its practical cash value. Set it at work within the stream of your experience. It appears less as a solution than as a program for work, and more particularly as an indication of the ways in which existing realities may be changed. Theories become instruments, not answers to enigmas which we can rest. We don't lie back upon them. We move forward. On occasion, make nature over again by their aid. Pragmatism unstifles our theories, and on occasion, numbers them up and sets each one at work. Being nothing essentially new, it harmonizes with many ancient philosophical tendencies. It agrees with nominalism, for instance, and always appealing to particulars, with utilitarianism and emphasizing practical aspects, and its disdain, and with positivism within its disdain for verbal solutions and less useless questions and metaphysical abstractions. The statement is not only pragmatic, but an explicit form of instrumentalism. And this idea of cash value of ideas reminds me of the pragmatic maxim, which states, consider what effects that might conceivably have practical bearings. We conceive the object of our conception to have. Then our conception of these effects is the whole of our conception to object. When I consider a problem, I must consider how to work it in the everyday world. I could think of any solution I want. I look towards what seems to work. I step towards the practical impact of the conception. I treat it effectively like a plan. But if we were to visit back to Peirce for an explanation, induction, which Peirce considers basically to be probabilistic, and abduction, we might find for us a workable explanation to this issue. Induction, as a method for finding truth, takes a long-term goal towards things which are approximately true. From his points on induction in his lecture on the types of reasoning, Peirce defines abduction as retroduction. It is not inductive because he does not adopt a mere probability, but as reasoning from a hypothesis, held with tenacity, provisionally adopted, as long as facts do not refute them. An example of this can be found within his second figure, that any thing of the nature M would have the character P taken haphazardly. S has the character P. Therefore, provisionally, we may suppose S to be of the nature of M. Of course, verisimilitude, veracity, and verity must be understood. One should not simply make a subjective hypothesis. How could one hold to a hypothesis which could not hold up to known facts? The result of the belief that air does not exist would be poor veracity, because it is inherently false. Though if one can make a hypothesis that would seem to be true, it is merely provisional, since it does not have an affirmation of its own verity in all cases. But this is when induction saves the day. Induction is a probabilistic method. It seeks to test the hypotheses at play. As the hypothesis is tested, truth is probably and approximately what is concluded by induction. My reasoning is being used as a tool in this inference. I plug in the data, such as my retroduction, or as we call them, abduction. I test them thoroughly. My mind is on a conception which is actionable and workable, and I ultimately arrive at the best possible solution by the combination of abductive reasoning with inductive reasoning. Now, another gem from James. This is acceptance of verificationism at the same time as instrumentalism. As he says, pragmatism, on the other hand, asks its usual questions. Grant that an idea or belief to be true. It says, what concrete difference will it, being true, make on anyone's actual life? How will the belief of trueness be realized? What experiences will be different from those which would obtain if the beliefs were false? What, in short, is truth's cash value in experiential terms? The moment pragmatism asks this question, it sees the answer. True ideas are that which we can assimilate, validate, corroborate, and verify. False ideas are those we cannot. That is the practical difference it makes for us to have true ideas. That, therefore, is the meaning of truth. For it is all truth is known as. If I take this and compare it to what I've already discussed, we have within our thinking a picture of pragmatism. It's a logical and radical empiricism, one which takes from the logic of Peirce and expands orientation of the psychology of James. However, there rests one thing, the idea of belief. We've already discussed it in relation to Peirce with how he's fine with faith. But what about William James? He had written The Will to Believe and argued that truth is what is satisfactory. Yet to Peirce, he just thinks of this idea of James as incomplete. To what end? What is satisfaction? Though on the other end, James was accused of magical thinking for this essay. But does this hold up? Magical thinking, in truth, William James did not believe in it. It's quite contrary. And what is proposed supposes that truth is accepted. But what is added upon it is an increase in truth with practical demands and emotional and intellectual satisfaction, etc. The old adage, facts don't care about your feelings. We hear it all the time. It's itself only partially true. I can accommodate facts within my feelings. I can draw inferences from limited facts. And the fact that I feel a certain way about a thing frames the facts which I draw from. A subjective factor arises. Yet, yes, facts do exist, but so does my thinking about things. I draw inferences from facts as well as my subjective belief. What good would it give me to have an unfounded pessimistic view like everyone will betray me someday? Yet, this is all taken into account with the thoughts of the thinker. The subjective inference and objective inference. Yet thinking itself relates upon the antecedent to consequent relationship. An antecedent A is true, then the consequent B is either true or false. If we take the I believe A and the consequence of A promotes B, the difference is to be taken in this possibility. It must also be possible for me to believe certain things. A instead of Y. If the facts force me to believe or not to believe, it forms an exclusive either or. A or Y can be believed, but if you don't believe Y, you must believe A. Yet, the reverse is also true. Though in other cases, the lack of force would mean that I could easily believe also that B is true as well. Another thing is that belief can have an impact upon life. If I believe that all people are possible traitors, then I will constantly look over my shoulder and have anxiety about this, expecting betrayal every time I encounter someone. But this is not a useful belief to my life in general. I can be very safe to say that yes, there's a fact of traitors, but not all people are traitors. And basically move on with my life. Now, there's also the fear from the facts. So say how this affects life negatively. Death. It's something that's going to happen. There's a fact. There's nothing we can really do about it. besides maybe take care of our lives, but even then, there's a possibility that something bad could happen to us and we effectively die. But if I fear death, there's unnecessary pain, unnecessary anxiety I had to fight because of my fear of death. And it could go on years and years and not be resolved. It's a waste of time. But there are two ways in which people can deal with the fear of death, which I think both would be good on pragmatic terms. One is accepting the belief that the soul is immortal, which would mean that the moment I die, it's not really the end. Death would just be a transition. If I believe in God and had a good life and so on, of course that would mean paradise and so on. But if I had this other option, I did not believe that there was any immortality of the soul. I would just die, I would disappear, there's no experience, I'm fine. In either case, death is taken care of. I don't waste my time with anxiety, I don't work myself up. And so that's a practical thing to my life. And even, if I should believe in God, which I do, my behavior would be better for it. And so there's a good chance that even if I was wrong, there's still practical and good benefit to believing in God, because thoughts do have practical impacts into reality. And for the most part, this seems to also suggest that there are a general ground of agreement in these two sorts of pragmatism. William James is more interested, without surprise, given his background, in the psychological element. And Peirce is more interested in the logical side of the view of pragmatism. While they both might have covered different topics, and maybe James does not care so much for the metaphysical questions as does Peirce, they are generally connected. The pragmatist who wants to do really well should embrace the psychology of James, but also embrace the logic, epistemology, and metaphysics of Peirce. Get that abductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, and even deductive reasoning, even though I didn't mention anything about deductive reasoning. But beyond that, let us consider and remember to consider what the effects that might have conceivably have practical bearing. We conceive the object of our conception. To have then our conception of these effects is the whole conception of the object. Remember, take my my blog in the description. Read the books, read the article. Like, comment, subscribe, give a comment.